Welcome to AM Best Audio.
In today's unpredictable world, uncertainty is an ever-present challenge for the insurance industry. From fluctuating markets and emerging risks to chance events that defy prediction, insurers must navigate a landscape where what we don't know can be as important as what we do. Drawing on the principles of probability and risk assessment, insurers can better anticipate potential outcomes, make more informed decisions, and strengthen resilience, according to Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter. He's Emeritus Professor of Statistics in the Center for Mathematical Sciences at the University of Cambridge. In his book, The Art of Uncertainty: How to Navigate Chance, Ignorance, Risk, and Luck. I'm Lori Chortis for AM Best TV, and Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter joins us now to discuss that and other key insights from his book. David, welcome. It's wonderful to speak with you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Not at all. A real pleasure to have a conversation on this.
David, can you tell us a bit about your book and what inspired you to write it?
The book is interesting. I'd written quite a successful book called The Art of Statistics, which dealt with the whole idea of taking data and what can we learn from data. But I've always been interested in what I consider actually a more deeper issue, which is how we deal with the uncertainty in our lives. And I spent my life sort of working on statistics and probability and learning about it and teaching about it and so on. And so I thought this is a great opportunity to, in fact, sort of broaden the idea out about uncertainty away from just probability. That's what I've learned. That's what I've taught. But I realize that in a world, the sort of world we live in at the moment, we have to face up to the fact that some of the uncertainties are rather difficult to get a handle on.
Can you tell us about the core principles of probability and how companies can apply them to make better informed decisions while distinguishing true risk signals from events driven by luck or coincidence?
That's quite a big question, isn't it? Really? I mean, you have asked, about how insurance works and so on. But okay, I'll try to do it fairly briefly. Yeah, I mean, the point is in the book, I just talk about uncertainty. I make it very personal. I consider it just being conscious awareness of ignorance, and it might be being ignorant about what's going to happen in the future, which is what a lot of insurance is about. But in a lot of our lives, we're also ignorant about what's happening at the moment or what's happened in the past. What's called epistemic uncertainty is the lack of knowledge. And I don't really distinguish between any of those because it's all a matter of the fact that we don't know whether we are an individual or a company or an organization or whatever. We just don't know. And so it's all, the same sort of thing. Now, when we've got quite nicely well-controlled circumstances and we can list the outcomes in particular, we feel we can at least make a list of what's going to happen. And then we obviously, say using all the data available we got in the past and assuming the future is going to be similar to the past, we can start assessing some probabilities for what's going to happen. And those may be very much based on past data. I'm thinking in sort of, really car insurance and life insurance stuff. We got masses of data and nothing that surprising is going to happen. And in that situation, we can build statistical models and calculate, or I don't like calculate, probably we can assess reasonable probabilities of what's going to happen and use it, of course, to set premiums and so on. But then, in real life, we get in areas where, well, maybe we're not so sure about what's can happen. The future, the possible futures start getting a bit more difficult to imagine. And we're getting into more the area perhaps of catastrophe modeling and, ensuring, big issues about, what might happen in the world and what might happen to companies, what might happen in cybersecurity, what might happen in AI and things like that, where actually just listing the possibilities starts becoming very difficult, let alone putting probabilities on them. And people have made in the past, I think, rather simplistic distinctions and said, the first one where we kind of know the probabilities, that's called risk. And if we don't, that's called uncertainty. And I don't agree with that at all. It's a complete continuum. Even in these risk situations, apparently where we do know things, there will be some surprises, there will be some situations that we misjudge. And so it's a complete continuum of our ability to actually specify reasonable probabilities. And at some point, I think we pretty well have to give up even trying to think of probabilities. But I do that very reluctantly because I come from a background in what's called Bayesian statistics, where subjective probabilities are just as valid as ones based on data. We can use subjective probabilities for events that have never happened before and make judgments on them. So the example I give in the book is in 2011, when President Obama was faced with this difficult decision about whether to raid the compound in Abbottabad, where Osama bin Laden was said to be there or thought to be there. And he set multiple teams going to look at the evidence and assess the probability that bin Laden was really in the compound. So it's pure what I call epistemic uncertainty. He's either there or he isn't. But they can still assess a probability. And some teams, which may have been kind of red teams set up to be deliberately rather critical, thought there's only about a 30 to 40% chance he was there. And others were really gung-ho, 80 to 90%, send in the SEALs. And he had to then, everyone had to weigh it up, and in among this diversity of probabilities, all of which were subjective, but took account of the evidence in different ways and used different ways of processing that evidence. And I kind of think he in the end he approved the raid, but it was, I think that really illustrates the value of getting multiple teams. And secondly, actually getting them to put a probability and not using words like he could be there and perhaps he's there, he might be there, which are just really in those serious situations, I think, can be deeply misleading.
And David, for insurers, how can they incorporate uncertainty and probability into risk assessment and underwriting to anticipate emerging risks such as pandemics or climate-related events?
Yeah, I think that whole thing. I've been involved in drawing up the National Risk Register in the UK to some extent. Like, I did some of the analysis for volcanoes. I mean, who would think that UK could be influenced by volcanoes? And it didn't used to be in our National Risk Register. It just wasn't on there until when was it 2010? Anyway, the Icelandic volcano went up. Spattered ash all over Europe, Northern Europe, and closed airspace for 10 days, absolutely sort of wrecked everything that was going on. And now, of course, volcanoes are in our risk register. And in those situations, and of course, also in the risk register, also all these emerging risks, all things, about various malicious risks as well have now got probabilities, rough probabilities put on them. And I think that's the issue, that it's so valuable. You can't get precise probabilities on these things, and you can't get a precise assessment of what the impact will be. But you can get a rough probability, and you can get an idea of the rough impact. But actually, where a lot of the real uncertainty is in how big the impact would be. And this was really disastrous, I think, for the UK, because before COVID, we had flu way up in the big pandemic flu, top of everyone's risk register, but emerging infectious diseases of the SARS and MERS kind that had previously happened in the Far East were, we had them in there, but we said, they might cause 200 deaths as opposed to 200,000. It's quite a big mistake to make in terms of, the potential harm from these, because we'd been influenced too much, I think, by what had happened in the previous outbreaks of SARS and MERS, where although there had been some deaths in Canada and everything, they hadn't really got beyond the places they'd come from. And so there was some not very good risk assessment, to be honest.
Customize your data experience. BestLink now offers an interactive company dashboard that provides company-level intelligence in a fast, user-friendly interface featuring interactive tables, charts, and Sparkline performance histories. Customize the dashboard tiles to prioritize the insurer ratings, data, and analytics that best support your workflow. AM Best. Our insight, your advantage.
What strategies can be used to update assumptions and models in response to constantly changing data?
Yeah, well, that's sort of what this idea of Bayesian reasoning is to do with. How do we update our beliefs in receipt of new evidence? And there's a mathematical formula to do that. If you feel you really do understand what's going on, you've got a good probability model for what's going on, and your beliefs update in that formula. But, again, in real life, things are rather complicated, and what we observe might be a surprise, might be something which actually sort of conflicts with our prior expectations. And then we have to be quite, we need to be agile and responsive to new information. So we change our mind fast. I don't know if you know this idea of hedgehogs and foxes, which is when it comes to super forecasting competitions, the kind which I think is really relevant for insurance, when you get people to sit down and think of all sorts of strange things that might happen in the future and to put probabilities on them. The people who are best at doing that are what are called foxes rather than hedgehogs, because a hedgehog is sort of, is supposed to say it knows one big thing. A hedgehog is rather fixed in their views. They've got an idea of how the world works and try to cram all their information into that one world view. Whereas a fox has got no ideology, no fixed way in which they think the world works. They're incredibly agile. They change their mind quickly on receipt of new evidence. They're very used to working with people. They're aware of their biases and so on. And these sorts of people, this sort of mind, has been found to be the best super forecasters. It's that sort of characteristic. So I think, and that's what you need in insurance. You need some people with these agile, imaginative mind. The phrase I use now all the time when I'm talking to audiences about living in an age of deeper uncertainty, of emerging risks which are difficult to think about, which are sort of novel, and where we haven't got models for handling them, is the need for humility and imagination. So, and that's my, what I plug now all the time. Humility is that you have to admit you don't know. Don't think, oh yes, we've tamed uncertainty, we've got all this sorted. No, you got to expect surprises. You got to expect surprises all the time. Think of the world at the moment; it's full of surprises all the time. So you got to have that humility to say, we can't really be sure about even the list of what might happen. But then you got to have imagination to try to think of what might happen. I mean, using Rumsfeld's famous words, which I rather like, you're trying to change the unknown unknowns into the known unknowns. So at least you got some grasp of what the possibilities are, the possible futures. I'm hopeless at that. I got no imagination. I'm a hopeless optimist. I'm a disaster. So nobody should ever have me as an advisor. But some people are really quite good at it. Ones who are really quite cold, and you don't think about what you want to happen. You have to think about what might happen. You got to be uninfluenced by what you think should happen. No. So I think with those principles, I think actually an organization can better face this deep uncertainty that we are in at the moment.
When it comes to risk, communication is so critical. David, how can insurers effectively communicate uncertainty to policyholders, regulators, and other stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite difficult because a lot of people don't want to hear uncertainty. They want to be told what's going to happen. I mean, it's nonsense. It's childish. It's like believing in Father Christmas and things like that. No, but so this is one of the things, and a lot of, and especially some politicians, no, just tell me what's going to happen. Don't say, don't just say on the one hand, on the other hand. So, and you've got to overcome that. You mustn't pander to that by pretending that you know things you don't. Sorry, those people just have to grow up and just face up to the fact that these are uncertain. Just because you're uncertain doesn't mean you don't know anything. You do know quite a lot. And so I think again, the thing I push all the time with colleagues as well is the need to be trustworthy. So you should not be trying to persuade people of something. If you want to be trustworthy, you genuinely want to empower them to make better decisions, whoever they are. And that means being open and honest and being balanced and saying about, the good things and the bad things that might happen, and being open about your uncertainties and how good your evidence is, which is sometimes very good and sometimes not, and so on. And, we've done research to show that if you do communicate in that way, even people who are rather skeptical about you, or particularly people who are skeptical about you, will trust you more. This is much better to admit uncertainty, because the people who are skeptical about you then feel as if their concerns have been met, rather than you just telling them something. And so it's both trustworthy in itself, as that is a good thing to do. It's also effective. It also practically works. works, if you are open and honest, it does help. I mean, people have to admit uncertainty, and you just have to get them to grow up and admit it. But I've seen some extremely good examples of when that's been done. In the book, I quote a guy I really like, John Krebs, who was head of the Food Standards Agency in the UK. When I don't know if you remember, we had disaster after disaster in our food chain. We had foot and mouth disease, and we had mad cow disease. We had everything. It was complete shambles, our food chain. And he had to deal with all this, with public communication of this. And he developed a sort of playbook that he then wrote about. And it's something I just remember all the time, and trying to watch for how people communicate in a crisis. Do they do this in a trustworthy way? Because what he says is that, first of all, you've got to tell people what you know. So you need to be clear. Yes, we know this, blah, blah, blah. Then you say what we don't know. You're upfront about the things that we're currently uncertain about, absolutely upfront. Then you say what we're doing about that, the research we're doing, finding out this out, we're doing this, we're studying this, blah, blah, blah. Then you tell people what they can do in the meantime. So you give advice that if they want to, maybe they want to be, rather precautionary because we don't know everything about it. Then the final thing is the most important one. And this is the one that politicians apparently cannot do. You admit that we will come back to you and our advice may change. As we learn more, our advice may change. That idea of provisionality, this is what we're saying at the moment, but, and we won't keep on changing our mind every week, but, things will change. And, during COVID, the politicians, I think everywhere, were absolutely hopeless at that. They have to appear absolutely sure and confident about everything, and then they can't change their minds. They're stuck in what they've said you have to do. And rather than, as we learn, it was reasonable to change behaviors as we learn more about the virus. And so I've been really strongly influenced by that approach, and I watch everybody when they're communicating the crisis. Have they got that, in a way, humility and trustworthiness to admit that things will change? And very rarely, it's very rare you see it.
And David, what key takeaways do you hope readers will gain from your book?
Oh, well, I try to make it quite fun, because I actually think uncertainty is not, that's why I talk about luck. I love the idea of luck and chance and surprises and coincidences. I love all these things. So one of the key takeaways, I hope, is that I always ask audiences, do you like uncertainty? And they all say, no, nobody likes uncertainty. And then I say, oh, yes, you do. Yes, you do. You don't want to know what you're going to get for Christmas. You don't want to know how a sports game is going to finish that you've recorded or something. You don't want to know how a thriller ends. You want to watch it all the way through. You don't just watch the last episode. And, and I usually then say, well, if I could tell you, would you want to know when you were going to die? And almost nobody does. Usually about 10% do, but maybe a bit less than that would like to know. They like, the planners. But most people don't. So I say, no, sorry, you do like uncertainty. Can you imagine not living a life with no uncertainty? It'd be the most horrific prison sentence you can imagine. How ghastly it would be. So look, admit it. We live in a world of uncertainty and we enjoy it. It's a massive part of being human. It's unimaginable not to be living uncertainty. It's lovely. It's wonderful stuff. So, there's upsides and downsides. It means we have nice surprises. We have coincidences. We have nice things that happen to us. We have good luck. And I believe in luck. I don't believe in luck as an external force, a goddess Fortuna that's looking down on us and influencing us. But I believe that, just the way that chance works in the world sometimes works in our favor and sometimes doesn't. I was lucky. On Friday, it's Saturday, I was going to sing carols with my choir, and I had to, but I was flying in the morning, and the plane had to be on time, and the plane was early. And then when I got to the station, a train was late. So I could get on that, and I could get there really in time. So it was amazing concurrence. And what did I do to deserve this? And I don't think there's anything I did to deserve it whatsoever. It was just the way, luck happened to sort itself out for me, and it very well might not have, and it won't next time, I'm sure. So I love that, the way it works, and I think that we just have to learn to live with it and in a way relish it.
David, this has been so fascinating, so informative, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Greatly appreciate it.
No, it's great fun. Really good. I'm very pleased to talk about these things. Yeah.
That was Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter, Emeritus Professor of Statistics in the Center for Mathematical Sciences at the University of Cambridge, and author of the book, The Art of Uncertainty: How to Navigate Chance, Ignorance, Risk, and Luck. For AM Best TV, I'm Lori Chortis.
Looking to get the full attention of the insurance industry? We have the platforms that will do just that. Whether it be AM Best TV, AM Best Audio, Best Review Magazine, or Best Day. Find out more by calling AM Best Advertising Sales at 908-439-2200, extension 5399, and have a great day.